Hello and welcome to today's webinar on the 8 steps to building a brilliant bot strategy. My name is Kerry Robinson and I'll be introducing the presentation today, and I'll be handing over to Dan, who's going to go through the core of the content. But before we get started, I wanted to do a quick poll just while we're waiting for a few others to join and to see exactly where you are. So pick one or more of these. I'll just start the poll now. So you can pick one or more of these. What do you find most challenging? Is it deciding what IVR and chatbots to build? Maybe it's creating a vision for what is conversational AI going to do in your business and for your customers? Or is the challenge building a business case to really justify the investments and understand the benefits that you're going to get back? Or maybe it's all about aligning stakeholders and making sure everyone's pulling in the right direction. So you can pick 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of these if you need to. I'll give it another 30 seconds to a minute for everyone to contribute to the poll. I can see quite a lot of us have contributed already. Just another 10 or 20 seconds to get the last responses. Okay, we'll end it there and I'll just share the results. So, actually quite a spread. Interestingly, no one has picked the deciding what IVR and chatbots to build. So it's great that you've got a feel for what you'd like to do with those IVR and chatbot systems. But it does seem that when it comes to creating that vision, really kind of telling that story, that seems to be a challenge. Building a business case, potentially challenging also, and aligning stakeholders is number 1 there in terms of the challenges with the group we've got here today. So I think the great news is that in this session, we're going to be covering all of these items and particularly talking about how to build that vision, how to use the data and to inform your business case, and particularly how to tell the story, how to engage stakeholders from the beginning and get alignment at the end to ensure that everyone is pulling in the right direction. So I'll just end the poll there. Let's move on. Just to get started, I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of the way I like to think about customer service optimization as a whole, just to paint a picture of exactly where conversational AI fits in. So I think this is a simple but quite useful way of thinking about customer service. We've got our humans and our bots at the front line of delivering customer experience, and behind them we've got a platform, often multiple platforms, that enable them to deliver a great service to customers. And if we look at the humans and the bots, what should humans be doing? What should bots be doing? What channels should they be operating on? That's what I like to call customer service strategy. That's an important part of delivering a great contact center, a great customer service. And then we've got human workforce optimization. So this is the platform or platforms that really help humans be the best they can be and really focus on delivering a great experience to customers. And then we've got conversational AI, or what I sometimes like to think of as bot workforce optimization. That's the platforms and the technologies and the bots that you build to deliver great customer experiences. Something else that we're starting to see as a bit of an emerging technology and emerging interest in the industry is trying to blend these things. So using conversational AI to assist agents, maybe having it listening in to chats or voice calls, in live, and detecting intents, detecting certain things that come up, and using that information to help the agent, almost like a supervisor leaning over their shoulder, perhaps with template responses, pointing to processes, or bring up relevant knowledge-based articles, so that the agent can really focus on delivering a great experience to the customer rather than battling with a back-end system. But today we're going to be focusing on conversational AI, and particularly strategy and how that fits into the overall bot management system. And if you've been to any of our webinars or interacted with us much before, I'm sure you'll have heard of this bot management system, but let me quickly introduce it to you. And I do believe this is the thing that actually makes the biggest difference in the outcomes that you'll get from your investments in conversational AI. Not the platform, not the design, it's the whole process of managing your bots, treating like a workforce. And it starts with analytics. And what are they doing? What kind of experiences are customers having with the bots? And they're not going to tell you this. You've got to peer into the data and see what's going on. And not just what are the experiences like, what impact are they having? What benefits are they delivering? This was the core of our first webinar in this series. And if you missed it, we'll share a link to that so you can see it on demand. But once you've got the data, you've got a hang of what's going on, then you can move into strategy. So what could your bots do? What should they do? What's it worth? And using that to create the guardrails and prioritize what to build. And before you build it, you've got to design it. So that's the third step in bot management, conversation design. Creating systems that really leverage that human instinct for language and feel very natural and engaging, and that customers really love to use and engage with and trust, so that they don't need to go through and speak to an agent when they've completed their task. Then, of course, once we've completed the design, we can deploy it, customers interact with it, and we get more data, and this cycle continues. And often people say, how do I get started with bot management? And the answer is just start. It kind of doesn't matter where you start. You can start with analytics, you can start with looking at strategy, you can start with design, but just start. And then the other elements follow. But sometimes, you do need to take a broader look, and you need to get the right framework within which to work. You've got to get stakeholder alignment, you need a vision. And for that, we use discovery. And discovery is really a broad look at all of the different elements, all of the things that the bots could do to come up with a vision, a business case, and a plan around which you can align stakeholders and use to guide the delivery of your systems and drive that bot management process. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Dan Aslet. Dan is the Director of Bot Strategy and Transformation at Waterfield as part of the Conversational AI practice. Dan has been building and refining this discovery process for more than 10 years now. So Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Kerry. So I think it helps to just take a step back, if you like, and think, what is bot strategy? And I think in the simplest terms, bot strategy first identifies situations where bots can give this kind of human-like or superhuman-like performance. It's also going to kind of build, if you like, the vision for what a bot with those capabilities which would be like, which I think goes back to some of the poll questions that we had earlier on too. And it's also going to assess the impact that those bots could have on the metrics that matter to you and your business too. And I think probably the next question is, why do it? Why do you need it? And really that comes down to, bots can be extremely good in very narrowly defined situations. So routing somebody to the right destination, maybe also working out, identifying who's getting in touch and verifying they are who they say they are, or arranging an appointment, for example. But what we tend to find is that every company and their users and their customer base is different, and what works in one situation probably won't work in another. So that's the idea of bot strategy, really, is to help you identify the areas where bots can add the most value to your business and help you to align them around that kind of common vision and the success plan that follows as well. So how does it work? Really, bot strategy as a process can be summarized into 8 steps, and they can be further broken down into 5 stages. And we call these the 5 C's of bot strategy. So you've got coordinate, collect, create, communicate, and commit here as well. So let's start off by looking at the first stage, which is collect. And it's made up of 3 specific areas of focus. And this is often called context gathering. So this is the stage of the process where you're really sensing, you're in this kind of listening mode, if you like, really understanding what's going on. And here, what we tend to find is we start by really kind of understanding the business's operation and its brand strategy. So we start by kind of meeting with key stakeholders to get that understanding. And at the start of any discovery, it's going to be really useful to spend time with each of those groups, just getting a very clear understanding of their key challenges that each of them are facing, their long-term goals, and to explore the potential risk if nothing changes for them too. It's also really key to explore things like the strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and threats that have already been seen by senior stakeholders and the wider team. And that's just going to help you get a complete picture of what's going on, but it does really help to ask those questions. And we tend to find that because it's really common that the issues and therefore the aims and objectives for business, operation, and brand don't line up 100% of the time. So understanding, if you like, the risks associated with any opposing interests is really critical in designing a roadmap that delivers maximum ROI, avoids friction, and for everybody that's involved. And it's only really then, once you have that knowledge, that you can understand how a bot workforce can achieve that vision, and you can identify the measures and the success targets that you'll need to signal that you've done a good job. So our next point is really understanding what the experience is, how the bots are performing currently. Now, what we tend to find a lot of the time is, believe it or not, that there's a good chance at least some of your clients or your team won't have listened or interacted with the various systems that greet customers, direct queries, or automate tasks. Or if they have, maybe they just haven't done it lately. So what we tend to do is to get an outside-in view of what users really experience. We find it best to analyze the current experience from a few different perspectives. So we'll actually do what we call a conversational AI review. So here we start by reviewing design documentation, and we'll meet with the design team and the speech science team. We'll also do some mystery shopping. So we start to sketch out the system, we start to interact with that system, and we'll also start to do a review of the conversational AI engagement data too. So this is where we take about 12 months of system data to review and understand how the app's working today. And then the idea is we essentially start to finally kind of score the system to create a kind of a performance snapshot, if you like, that we can refer back to later, and we call this a CX diagnostic. This helps us as we start to get a real understanding of the current kind of experience we've got today. What we also want to do at this point is really understand who your users are and what they want. So here we also carry out quite a bit of attitudinal research, where we understand propensity to carry out certain tasks underneath certain conditions in certain channels as well. And that's really key to understand what users are willing to do and what they can and can't do as well. It's also really key to understand users a little bit more broadly, so their contact patterns and their contact types. So here what we're looking to do is understand how often they get in contact and for what reason. So we'll identify the top 80% of contact reasons. And to do this, we also kind of understand the main reason for doing this is to make sure that you can blinker in on just those areas of focus that have the most potential. It's very easy to get kind of swayed, if you like, by opinion, but actually what we want to make sure is that we're looking at the areas that have the most contacts, the most potential. So we take that data once we know what it is, and then we'll go and speak with agents, because they know more about what's actually happening with those particular interactions. The data itself just tells us that something's happening and how often, but it doesn't actually tell us why. So that's where we talk to agents. They're on the front line, so they really understand the needs of the customer better than anybody else. And what we're really trying to understand here is two key things. The first is what exactly agents log against each disposition code or contact code when they're finishing or wrapping up a call or a contact. And the other is, how does their software count those dispositions? So specifically, can you have one disposition per contact, or can you have multiple dispositions per contact? This is going to be really critical when you come to building your business case, because then you can start to align this data with the kind of data model and the business model that you're building out to. So that's the collect phase. Next, we're into the create phase. Here again, we've got three specific areas. And we're going to start off here with essentially kind of producing a short list, if you like, of the opportunities that you think are going to be the strongest and will warrant automating. And we call these our candidates for automation. And in his book, The Best Service is No Service, Bill Price, who was the former Amazon Global VP of Customer Service, outlined a really interesting technique for identifying what you should automate and what you can automate here as well. And it's called the Value Irritant Matrix. And it just uses a very simple 2x2 box system to categorize contacts based on two criteria. The first is, do your users find the contact irritating or valuable? And then the second is, does the business find the contact irritating or valuable? So let me just kind of explore this a little bit more. So first up in the bottom left, we've got eliminate. So these are things that we just need to stop doing. Things that are bad for us as a business and bad for the customer as well. So generally speaking, these are going to need further analysis to understand root cause before you can kind of automate or take any further action. So this might be a broken down process. It could be issues with a handoff to another channel like SMS or an email. It could be a bug in the code of the bot that means that you're dropping chats or you're dropping calls. Or it could be an issue with a partner that's doing a further service like order status. Maybe the partner's doing a bad service as they're delivering the product. So next up in the top left, we've got simplify. So this is really understanding more about these kinds of contacts. It's going to be really valuable to you, but probably not very valuable to the customer. So these are going to be great learning opportunities that can potentially mean future cost cutting, maybe acquiring extra customers or increased revenue generation later on. But as with Eliminate, they need further analysis. So this is really useful for the contact center or for the business to understand, eliminate, and simplify. But as we're starting to think about conversational AI, it's a little bit less related to us at this point. In the top right, we've got leverage. And this is really contacts that are valuable to customers and also to your business. So what we tend to find here is these are generally complex contacts. So probably there's an opportunity to generate some revenue. It might even aid customer retention or convert a potential negative experience into maybe a positive one. So this might be product recommendations, quite complicated product recommendations, refunds, complaints potentially as well. So it's best with these kind of contacts to handle them with well-trained people. So you identify them first and you get them across to people that can really help them make sure that they're being looked after properly too. And that leaves us one last quadrant, which is automate. And this is really going to be the one that we're most interested in, because here, the contact's valuable to the customer, but it isn't necessarily great for our business to be able to handle it in the contact center all the time. That's probably because it can be handled in a more cost-effective way too. And this doesn't mean that we just need to automate it and ignore it. It just means we need to do a great job here. We've got the opportunity to make some real cost savings potentially. So these are going to be contacts that or opportunities where we want to motivate customers to use automation. So a good example might be, imagine an order status call or a contact that takes 4 minutes to handle in the contact center, but it has zero opportunity for revenue generation. So, while it's useful for the user essentially to know where their package is, the reality is for most of that process, it's simple enough that the user can get the information via an SMS or a chat or an IVR without ever needing to speak with an agent. So this is a great example where we can still do a really good conversational piece of automation without impacting the user experience and just handling those more complex versions of that particular query, but still taking a lot away from the contact center. So that's a good example of something we can automate there. So what we're really doing at this point is we're using the valuability matrix to further classify the information provided by agents, just to help us focus on just those contacts where conversational AI can make a real impact for us, which is really key. So it just helps us as a filtering exercise here. And then next in the create stage, essentially what we're doing here is building that business case. So here we're taking those candidates for automation. We're working, forecasting things like time and cost savings. We're estimating the kind of other benefits here, like net benefits, and then we're projecting out our profit and loss. And when we think we can realistically get some return on investment here. So how long is it going to take to get to market, to develop it, to get it out, to do a couple of iterations, and what's that going to feel like once it's out there too. Now, obviously, that's not enough by itself. We also, as a final stage here in the correct stage, we carry out some prioritization and planning activities too. And this is really just to identify the packages of work that we need to do or deliver to achieve that vision and then realize those benefits we've detailed in the business case as well. So really key part of kind of reprioritizing. And you'll be surprised sometimes that it's not the things that we think of as being the most valuable that go first sometimes, because maybe they take longer to develop as well. So they take longer to reach the market. There might be some quick wins we can get in there as well. So the idea here is when we finish the create stage, we're now in the communicate stage, and we're armed at this point with a really clear value proposition, or a picture of the value proposition at least. And now it's time to bring that experience to life, if you like, with some vision clips and some storyboards, and then communicate it back to our stakeholders. And one I think of the really interesting things I've found over the years is that how you communicate your ideas is really, really important, especially to senior groups of stakeholders. And in fact, Jerome Bruner, a US psychology, poses that it's 22 times more likely for your stats to be remembered if you wrap those facts and figures up in a story. And writers have been doing this for centuries. And I think this is quite interesting because one of those popular story narratives is what we call the hero's journey. And it's one of many that are out there, but we'll probably all recognize this from myths and Hollywood films and novels, from everything from Harry Potter to Star Wars. And it's built on top of Aristotle's 3-act structure, where every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And a guy called Christopher Vogler, who is a screenwriter, came up with 12 sub-steps that take our characters in these kind of journeys, if you like, from their normal day-to-day life to something completely out of the ordinary and back again. Now, while we're not discovering new worlds or slaying dragons or doing anything that those films would be doing, we can adapt and create a similar kind of story arc for our discovery and strategy work. So let me take you through that really. So it looks a bit like this. So it's 8 steps rather than 12. And we'll start off with the current state. This is the world today. So the narrative might go a little bit like this. Up until now, we've really only had very basic routing, no self-service, but our queues are getting much larger and we can't continue to add extra agents to take those contacts. Then we'll move to the long-term goal. So here, this is really what we're trying to think, why is a change needed? So the narrative might be something like, our users are online, we know that, we want to meet them in the channels that they're using. So we want chat self-service to be an extension to our service offering. Next, we've got the mission brief, which is, this is the scope of this particular initiative or this project. So the narrative might be something like, the brief of this engagement is to understand what's possible and what return on investment really looks like for us here. So again, you're talking the language of stakeholders at this point. You're painting quite a straightforward picture for them to take in as well. Next, you're talking about what you did. So this is the method and the approach. So your narrative might be something like, so based on that, to better understand X, Y, and Z, we actually set out to test the current system and to see what our competition was doing in the space as well. Then we're going to talk about what we found here. So these are the results and the particular conditions for those results, and elaborating a little bit on what we found as well. So what it means, starting to edge towards what it means a bit here. So the narrative might be something like, we found that our competition pretty much has all of the features that we're looking at are automating, but maybe they're far from best in class. And then this brings us on to our next piece, which is, what does that mean? So this is the cause and effect, what we need to prevent or violate certain things that we've found. So our narratives at this point might be, what does this mean for us? It tells us that, what we're looking to do is possible. It also shows us that we can leapfrog other players in the market to become best in class. We might also mention here finding some of our business cases. So this might be, it tells us we've got a compelling business case that indicates $2 million of year-on-year saving with an ROI of at least 9 months. So we start to string this all together a little bit. This is where the conclusion comes in. This is where we're validating and talking about what's conclusive and inconclusive, and what might contradict our original hypothesis as well. So this is really where you start to bring it together. So you might say something like, so to sum up, we found no signs of any risk with our plan to roll out chat. But the only thing we can see at this point is a cost of delay. So this is the cost of doing nothing. And this might be that we stand to lose $60,000 per week for every week that the solution isn't live. So again, you start to give a reason for why you might need to do certain things as well. And that's just talking the language of business once more too. And then finally, you've got one more, which is commit to change. So hopefully at this point, here you're starting to work towards this new world that we're trying to understand and bring to be. So here, the narrative might be something like, we think that all of the success criteria has been met. When can we get started? So at this point, you've wrapped it up. You've had a great conclusion, hopefully, and you can kind of get onto the commit stage really at this point. So that's your kind of your broad narrative, if you like. There's still something else to be done here to bring it to life for your audience too. And just what I tend to find here is I've seen lots of occasions where clients and other companies I worked at where they've used sample dialogues and high-level design diagrams to try and bring the story to life. And these are great tools for capturing conversations and documenting your flows, but they can be too detailed for bringing the actual experience to life here. So instead, we'd recommend using vision clips and storyboards, because these are audio visual examples that allow you to start to experience the kind of vision, rather than read it or try and kind of pull it out of a diagram at that point too. So these are great for a high level audience. Great. So I think here, finally, hopefully you've completed all these steps, and assuming you've got a great business case that helps you justify the investment you need, then you're going to be able to commit to the plan you started. Just a couple of final things which I tend to see here. I think there are 4 key mistakes we tend to find that organizations who are trying to start out on conversational AI projects make. And the first is the project isn't aligned to vision. So it fails there. Maybe there's a lack of team alignment too. So people don't really know how to get involved in it. We tend to see both of those being resolved by that strategic backlog activity at the start of the discovery. Focus on solution rather than on the problem. So it's quite common that starting conversational AI projects, people have already made technology decisions. We already know that technology doesn't solve problems all the time. So that problem focus is really key here. So understanding where the contacts are, understanding what could potentially improve on those. And technology is one of those potential solutions, but you need to understand that problem space first. And the last one is missing clear, having no clear success measures and targets. And it's surprising the amount of projects that start that way, but people haven't really set out what does success look like. So how can you avoid them? Just quickly here, I think it's really key just to be aware of that you're managing some complex change here. And to be successful here, you need to be aware of 5 things. You need a vision, you need people with the right skills who are going to be incentivized to succeed as well. They also need to have access to the right tools and resources. And finally, you need an action plan to bring all that together. I think the neat thing with bot strategy and the discovery as a framework is that it definitely deals with the first piece there, which is vision, and the last piece, the action plan. Obviously, these projects are complicated. You need to make sure you've got people with the right skills who are incentivized and have access to the right resources. If you've got all 5 of those, then you're going to be absolutely fine. So, Kerry, maybe back over to you.
Thank you, Dan. So really helpful to see the whole process from end to end there, Dan. Thank you for that. I just want to pick up on the last element you shared, because I think it's really interesting. That the discovery process really brackets with a vision and action plan that the whole mechanism of managing complex change. And of course, once you've got a vision and you've got an action plan, then you can really identify the skills of the people that you need, the incentives, how to make sure they're all aligned around achieving the objectives and resources that it's going to take to deliver it. So don't go trying to deliver complex change without having all these elements sorted. And to get these elements sorted, discovery is a really great way of doing it. Now, we're not here to sell you. This is all about just sharing, our approach, our frameworks for delivering maximum ROI with conversational AI. But I did want to share a couple of client feedback that we got from the discovery process, just to show you that this isn't just concept. It's just not ideas. We've done this dozens of maybe hundreds of times and got some great feedback. Here's an example from Bindi Patel, a senior product manager at a large US national retailer. And she said, the discovery was a cornerstone of our ability to progress so quickly. They guided us, educated us, and helped demonstrate what's possible. I think this is a really great example of what discovery does. When you want to do something, but you're not sure what or how to measure it, and when you want to deliver change, discovery really helps give you the elements that you need to deliver change successfully. And here's another one from Dan Keller, a senior product manager at a global sports retailer. It's a unique and thoughtful approach. It's not like, this sounds good. It's structured, it's data-driven, and actually helped deliver award-winning results for this particular client. So that's it for the main presentation. Thank you for joining. We do have time at the end here for some questions. We've got 10 or 15 minutes if you'd like to stay on and answer any questions. So let me just finish the screen share and we'll see what questions we've got. Andrew, if you can just drop the questions into the chat, that'd be great. Here we go. Here we go. A
couple there. I think there's one or two here which stand out initially, so maybe I can kind of go with one or two. I think, how do you best measure effectiveness of deployed bots? I think it's I think there's a couple of ways of looking at this, and Kerry would have covered this in the analytics presentation if you haven't already looked at this. I think this kind of bridges into strategy quite nicely. I think you've got some performance metrics which give you high level ideas of how your bots are performing, but then you've also got some diagnostic information too, which tells you exactly what's going on behind the covers. And I think that's the kind of the key elements that you need to kind of straddle there to make sure you've got access to those high level metrics that you can see at a broad level. Then you also need to be able to see what's happening underneath. So you need to understand what's happening at the recognizer within certain states, where people are moving on to within the bots. Understand whether or not after certain self-service tasks, people are still reaching agents. I think that's a really, really key area here. So we tend to measure the standard performance metrics that you would think of, which would be aspects of containment. That's a wider piece here, but also task completion a lot too, and engagement too. So I think they're really key. But again, this is bot strategy that we're kind of focusing on here rather than analytics. I think it's then what you do with that data. And I think the core thing here is having access to that is one thing, but then you need to make some good decisions on top. And that comes back to the process we've just talked about, which is, again, just understanding what the problems are, looking at that data, and the effectiveness is going to be, are you still reducing contacts if that was the aim? And it might also be, are you getting contacts to the right place? Enough of them as well. So I think you need to be really clear with what the success metrics are to be able to get the most out of, understand if you're getting the most out of your bots.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think if you do want to dive deeper into this, we did cover a lot of this in the first of this three-part series, and I think Angela did drop the link to that on demand into the chat. So do follow that and check out that session on bot analytics. I think, just to put that more in the context of strategy, I think the important thing that comes out of discovery is what you want. You know what are the benefits that you're wanting to deliver, and you know how to measure them. And so it really provides the right framework for success, because you know what you're trying to achieve, you can align everyone around that vision, and then you can build in the metrics that will measure, have you achieved what you wanted to achieve? And if you did or you didn't, it will allow you to dive deeper and see why your bots being more successful and how can you double down on that, or where perhaps are your bots having challenges and they're not delivering the experience or the benefits that you'd expect to deliver based on the discovery process. And then you can really dive into that data and understand why that is and make changes to improve it. And that really brings us to the whole bot management system, that you don't just do strategy once, you don't just do design once, you don't just look at the data once. It's this continuous cycle of data driving strategy, driving design, driving new deployments, driving more data, and then we continue. So we've got another question here, Dan. What data is most crucial and how is it best to interpret this? And I think we're thinking broadly in terms of all of the different data inputs you talked about today as part of the discovery process. Are there any that are really crucial and you've got to do them? Are there others that maybe it's just a bit tough to get that data and you can deprioritize?
I think ultimately contacts are always really key in the contact center. So starting there, if you don't have access to your bot data within your bots, you can always go back to understanding what's happening in the contact center. So what's being measured. I think then that can be pulled together with some anecdotal information from agents too. If you can get data from your bots, you really want to understand how many contacts you're getting. I think it's worth kind of staying a little bit kind of cautious around things like containment, because that doesn't necessarily show you if you've had a good interaction or not. It's a bit of an old metric now, essentially, that says we've managed to contain a contact. It doesn't necessarily mean that that user resolved their contact properly in the way that you're expecting, or if there was a problem within that contact as well. Another really neat one to look for can be repeat contact as well, because that can be in a short period of time, can also show you whether or not that person's had to contact again. That's not to be confused with first time resolution. This is more about understanding the overall journey that somebody takes across channels. So if they've had an outbound contact, then they've made an inbound contact, being kind of aware that sometimes you can drive contacts from outbound channels into inbound channels. If you've got no context kind of to kind of join those experiences up, the likelihood is that your bots aren't providing a very kind of good experience to the user on the front end either. Okay, so should we move to another one?
Yeah, when I come in, so how would you approach discovery for different channels? I think the question is the discovery process different for IVR or chat or text messaging maybe? And what are you looking at that from a multimodal perspective, as looking at each of the different channels that customers might use to contact?
Yeah, I don't think the discovery process doesn't necessarily change. I think your recommendations at the end of it change, but ultimately you're still understanding what needs to change from a strategic direction. Once you understand that, then you're looking again at what's happening from a contact perspective. What channels are people contacting today? Does it make sense that the user group really is using these other channels? Because you need to meet people where they are. There's no point inventing a channel just because you think it might be cheaper, that really isn't going to provide, isn't going to kind of work well with your particular user base. So I think that's always part of this. I think from an omni-channel perspective and a multimodal perspective is understanding the interplay between those. How many people start on one channel, move to another? Does it make sense? Are they going to be receptive to switching to another channel during their experience? Do they do that today? Where would they prefer to serve? I think it's only once you've started to understand some of those queries, and you'll get those from the steps we walked through today, that I think you can start to pull it together into a strategy. What I would say is, too many businesses today are siloed with those approaches. So you'll have a team that handles one type of channel, another team that handles another. One of the biggest trials here is to try and get those teams talking, so you can start to understand what the vision and the alignment is across those teams. That's where you get the real success. But still, a lot of those teams are working on separate services too. So you might have an IVR team, you might have a chat team, you might have an SMS team. There's different legacy technical stacks behind those too. So there are constraints. But ultimately, you're trying to create a joined up experience for the user. And that's the key thing we always need to be really sensitive to. And we also need to challenge as we build that strategy. It's not good enough just adding another channel into the mix if that just makes it harder for users to try and self-serve because they don't know which one is going to get them the best overall kind of their task completed quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think there was a particular slide in today's presentation actually where you talked about attitudinal research. And I think sometimes as part of the attitudinal research, you can ask customers, right? What would their thought process be? Like, how would they approach solving a problem? What channels would they feel they would naturally be drawn to solve a problem? But also, if this was available, would you use it? I mean, is that something that you found useful as well?
Yes, and sometimes you need to be a bit cautious about asking users what they would do in a situation they're not currently doing. We do always need to be aware of that. But I think if you join that up with other industry information, so if you're also reviewing what other competitors in the space are doing too, I think it provides a very, very good information point for you. So absolutely, I think it's a good thing to ask your users. But I think it also helps that you are kind of going out and looking to see what competitors are doing in your space, but also maybe people doing in similar spaces, solving similar challenges in a different vertical. So what somebody in an airline space doing that you could also do in a retail space or a utility space, for example.
Got it. Thanks, Dan. Got another question here. So what are reasonable expectations for conversational AI to improve over time, and what inputs or management is needed to achieve that? So maybe I can just take that at a high level, and then Dan can dive a bit deeper in there. Ultimately, the only way you'll know what is the size of opportunity is by doing the kind of discovery process. So, you know, we have systems we've deployed where there's maybe 10 to 15% of tasks completed in the IVR versus, or the chatbot versus the contact center, and that's a great win. We've got others where 80% plus of the interactions happen in automation, and only 20% or so go to agents. So in terms of sort of containment metrics, you know, task success metrics, it is so dependent on your business, your customers, your back-end systems, and your vision and your strategy. So don't get too drawn into, oh, this person says they've got X containment and this person says they've got Y containment, or in my industry, people expect to have X or Y containment. I think it's much better to take a personalized approach, and discovery, you know, allows you to do that. And then the question is, so you know, making up numbers here, you've got $1 million of benefit a year identified within discovery. You know, what's it going to take to deliver that? Well, don't try and deliver it in one go. That's the whole point of the bot management process and the discovery process, is to identify packages of work that have a business case, that the cost to deliver and the benefits expected to flow from it, you know, create an ROI, and then prioritize those packages of work that have got the best ROI and will deliver the best outcomes in the shortest amount of time. And that's all part of that prioritization process. But you know, ultimately, the bot management system is what will drive the improvement. So discovery will tell you what's the, you know, the size of the prize, what could be achieved, and then bot management will take you through that process of picking a package of work, prioritizing it, getting it delivered, looking at the data, and using that feedback into strategy, because you may not get quite the outcomes you wanted in the first iteration, and you'll learn new things that might cause you to reprioritize certain areas of strategy, or even change assumptions that you'd made in terms of how certain things could perform. So I think that's an important point to recognize, is that the discovery is the starting point. It's a way to kind of lay out the vision, the business case, the plan, but then it really becomes a dynamic thing as part of that bot management system, constantly updating the system, getting new data, feeding that into your strategy, and using that to prioritize what you do next. But Dan, that's really the core of what your team do at Waterfield. So talk us through, like, how discovery sets the scene, and then how bot management really delivers the incremental results that you identified.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, there's no point just jumping in. You know, it can sometimes be the problem with kind of agile release trains, when you've got large projects moving on for a long period of time, and having the budget for that to continue. I think that's the key thing that discovery also lays out, is what is the opportunity, the complete opportunity that we can see here, because at some point, as with all projects, there has to be an end of life, if you like. We've reached, if you like, the maximum optimization that we can get right now, and we can make small incremental changes. At that point, we need to change, you know, our approach to a different channel, or to maybe we've solved the problem completely, if you like. And it's just about how do we maintain it and ensure that we're periodically checking back, and ensuring that the experience is still operating as we expect. So I think, you know, the core part of this is setting the ground rules for the future engagement, making sure you've involved your stakeholders, you've got those business cases that you can refer back to in those projects and those iterative kind of cycles that follow. You should constantly be building on those business cases. The likelihood is that your first phase, or you know, set of sprints, if you like, will probably not take exactly the same form that you have from the discovery, but that's fine. We just slightly adapt that business case. We deprioritize and reprioritize things, and at that point, then we're able to bite off what we think we can do in a certain, you know, kind of the next kind of sprinting plan, and we'll come back to those every time we look at data. But at one point, we always need to be cognizant of, is there enough remaining value to keep the team running on that particular project, or are we moving into a more of a BAU or an embedding phase where we've done the main body of work right now? So that's the core thing. We've always got to be mindful of what were the original strategic goals. Have we achieved them? Have we reached that point where we're now, you know, in the horizons model of product strategy? Are we exploiting the product? Are we allowing it to do its main purpose before we sunset it? And we've got to always just understand that, especially with channels, people are going to move from one channel to another as other channels replace them over time too. So in the last few years, we've seen assistants become more popular. We've seen chat channels become more popular. They're going to ebb and flow and move up and down. So we need to be constantly aware of does it make sense to be working those channels at that particular point. And that comes back to that point that Kerry's mentioned about the value that comes from business cases and data, really.
Cool, thanks, Dan. I'm conscious that we're nearly up to time. There was one other question for someone relatively new to the field who understands bot development, but not so much about strategy and success metrics. What materials could you recommend to read up on or to watch? So, we do a lot of education in this area. I think there's a few things I can point you to immediately. We have an ebook on IVR and chatbot metrics, which might be interesting to you. We'll drop a link to that in the chat here. We did the first webinar of this series, which was all about bot analytics. This is the second of the series, all about strategy, and the third, all about conversation design. So definitely, if you missed the first webinar, catch up on that. And if you want a more general overview, one of the first webinars we did this year was all about our framework for looking at conversation AI in general, how it fits into the contact center, and the key things beyond the tech and the development that you really need to be thinking about. So we'll drop those into the chat and maybe follow up with attendees with a little list of interesting content that would help build out and round out this picture. So that is all we've got time for. There was one more question that if you've got a couple of minutes, I'm happy to answer. The conversational AI space is likely to change on several fronts in the next 4 to 7 years. How far do you go with your vision to your potential customers? I think it's a really good question and a nice one to end on. The one thing that we know is going to change is the technology, the platforms. They're going to continue to evolve and become more capable. But the other thing we know is that we are a long way from strong AI. We can leverage AI in many forms, in narrow situations, but we as humans, as leaders in this space, need to figure out where can our bots be successful and deploy them there. And whilst the areas and the opportunities to deploy them will expand, the reality is that we're going to have to consistently make sure our bots are doing the right things, that we're measuring them, and are continuously improving them using a bot management process. So everyone, thank you so much for your time and for your questions today. We're just dropping a few links into the chat. We will follow up with an email with those links as well. Really appreciate you being here. Do look out for webinar number 3, which will be in a couple of weeks, where we will be looking at conversation design with my Director of User Experience and Conversation Design, Sarah Reitzner. But for today, thank you very much, and see you soon.